252.
Hey, welcome to another episode of 252. Frank G here along with
Johnny Blaze,
Quarter Kurt,
Ralphie D.
And this week we'll be talking about what else? Avengers Endgame. You knew we were going to have an entire show about this, right? So who wants to start this off?
Spoilers!
Yeah, spoilers. But about time.
Well, they dropped the spoiler ban as of, is it
I
done?
think it was Monday.
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right, awesome.
By the time this gets up.
Yeah, by the time this gets up, it'll already be on video.
It'll be on VHS. It'll be on VHS because you're going to go back in time and let's watch the movie on VHS in the 80s.
Time heist.
For the time heist. I like to start off by saying when I did my review, I did open up by saying that this was not a perfect movie, but in my opinion, it was the complete comic book movie. Now, for me, I love fan service, and I love that when you are a fan of a series, or in this case, this world, 22 movies in, you followed all 22. When the end, the last line of Iron Man, and then the real pop in Avengers Endgame, when Thanos was saying, what did Thanos' line was? I am inevitable or something.
I'm inevitable.
And then he said, and then Tony's like, I am Iron Man.
Yeah.
And that was and that's how because of course, when we saw Iron Man for the first time, they were asking him, who's this guy? Who's your bodyguard? Yeah. And he was like, I am Iron Man. And it was like, oh, wow, already a superhero movie. And the first thing he does is takes his secret identity, throws it out.
I like that. That was a shout out to the old Iron Man because he used to say, Tony Stark used to say, Iron Man's my bodyguard in the old comics when he first came out.
Well, yeah, right.
And then I love that when he said, he was reading the card and said, oh, right, I'm his bodyguard.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a nice shout out.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. Ultimately, what Avengers Endgame was. Yes, it was the culmination of the Infinity Saga of all of these movies, and they had dropped hints about Thanos going way back when, 2012's Avengers, when he was like, I guess I got to do this myself, And we were like, oh my God, it's Thanos, and we didn't see him for 7 more years.
I'm saying.
I mean, it was a slow burn. It was a slow burn, and
worth it.
Like I also said before in our review, for me, I felt like this wasn't a sequel. This was the giant-sized annual of all of these titles, and we got the book, and then
we got a giant fold-out page with a giant battle on it.
It was like you'd have a panel, and they'd be saying something in here, and there'd be a little asterisk, and then you look down on the bottom, it said you need to read issue, and that's what it was.
Ed note, yeah.
Yeah, and every time you had one of those in the movie, it was a fan service because you got these things like. Of all of whenever they had the top 10, the top 15, the top 20 of these MCU movies, and they would rate them, towards the bottom of that list, it would always go between The Incredible Hulk or Thor: The Dark World, always at the bottom.
Yeah.
And this movie made Thor: The Dark World relevant. I mean, it was a huge chunk of scene where it was like, Thor, who was going through some serious PTSD. I mean, his body, Thor Lebowski is probably the best superhero character. Because even when he finally was all Thored out again and had his weapons, he still was
in the costume.
It was like, I'm still fat. I got to do some sitting.
Let me say this right now.
I got my dad bod.
Frank, tell me that they did this on purpose, the director or whomever. The shout out to Secret Wars #4.
Well, I'm sure they did. That's that whole scene was pretty much that scene,
Yeah,
the Hulk,
exactly.
The Avengers are buried beneath 40 tons of crap, and the Hulk is the only thing holding it off.
Yes, I love that.
That was a great cover, too.
Definitely. I remember seeing that cover in 7-Eleven while I was about to go play Super Mario Brothers. But just Thor holding up a mountain, a bunch of passed out heroes around him. What's he got to do? he's going to take the tech of Spider-Man, the tech of Iron Man, and the tech who was actually Rhodey in Secret Wars, which was pretty dope. And
It worked out nicely.
Reed Richards smarts. Oh, they couldn't get Reed Richards in there. To get
I think
from under there.
that maybe the directors, but also the writers, somebody, and also the producers, they actually read the books they were basing these stories on, which goes, what we were talking about before the show with the Dark Phoenix thing.
Sure.
They know all this history. They know of these key moments. They know what happened in these huge storylines that have run for 30 years. Enough to make a 22 movie series that actually makes it work for people who haven't read any of those books.
Yeah,
That's true.
because one of the things, not to step on JB's toes, but for the entire Infinity saga, JB has always stated, well, without Silver Surfer, none of this makes
And
sense.
Adam Warlock. Come on.
Adam Warlock. I'll loan you the books. Yeah, Adam Warlock.
No,
is
yeah, there's
like the central character.
No Reed and Doom. I mean, these are central. A lot of this stuff was based around Fantastic Four science.
Yeah,
But
That's just thrown out the door. None of that. Tony Stark science.
That
Yeah.
cutscene at the end in the end credits
A little bit of pip.
in Guardians of the Galaxy 2,
No,
I thought for sure they were bringing in Adam Warlock. He
Right.
said, we'll call him Adam. I said, it's got to be Adam Warlock. He's going to be there.
That's what I said.
No.
And
They could still go that way, but now they probably actually will go as Guardians of the Galaxy for the next one.
Oh, that was so good. I mean,
I read that Hemsworth signed on for 3 more movies. Of
I
some
read
sort,
that too.
so-
But I didn't know if that was an official thing. I read the headline. I didn't read the whole article. So
well, that's what
He seems to like playing funny Thor versus dead
Yes.
serious Thor.
that was a big, and that's why I said going back to that scene when he was with what's the mother's name? Renee Russo.
Helen
Freya?
or Freya.
Freya. When he was with Freya, and she was like, "Oh, you're my son, but you're not. What are you from the future?" He's like, "No." And he goes, "I'm so totally from the future."
Yeah. This stuff is just so well written, and you've got the right actors to deliver these lines that hit. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's like I want to go ahead and thank Taika Waititi, because he was like, "Hey, Helmsworth's funny. I'm about to open this guy up and let him go."
Yeah.
Because that Thor Ragnarok by far was the better of the Thor movies, in my opinion. But I was revisiting Avengers. And, they even had Thor had some funny stuff before because they were talking bad about Loki. And he's like, hey, that's my brother and stuff like that. He's an Asgardian.
He slaughtered a bunch of people.
He's adopted. But talking about, again, I was just watching Avengers, and there was a scene in the Avengers where Cap and Tony are getting into it. And it's that scene where he's like, when Cap's talking to him, it's like, who are you without the suit? And he's like, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, that whole thing.
Then his comeback, he says, I know guys who have none of that are twice the man you are.
Yeah.
That
And
was
he
awesome.
said, and then Cap was like, you're not the kind of guy that will lay it down on the line and let the other guy crawl over you. And he was like, no, I'm the kind of guy that'll just cut the wire or lay down on the wire and let the other guy crawl over you. And he was like, no, I'm the guy that just cuts the wire. And Cat was saying, basically, you're not even a real hero. You're not a real hero.
Yeah.
You're just making pretend. And they got into this standoff. And again, going back to Endgame, when he says, I am Iron Man, because the scene before that, where he was talking, or a couple scenes before that, where he's talking with Doc Strange, he's like, are you sure this is the one way? And Doc Strange was like, I can't tell you what it is, because if I tell you,
it's not gonna
happen. Yeah. And that was your first indications, like, this might be it. And then when he looked at him and was like, he just gave him hey, look, you see what's about to happen. This is the number one. Mm-hmm. So when Tony does the snap, he 100% knows that he is laying on the wire.
Yeah, that's true.
For the entire world.
I felt like he had redeemed himself in that movie where he said it. That was in the Avengers.
In Avengers?
Yeah, when he
when he
the
went up.
missile out of the
Yeah,
He thought
but
he was
no,
gonna-
because you read the next one. He's like, "Hey guys, remember when I took the missile?" He still wanted.
Well, he still wanted props for it.
Yeah, well,
but
come on,
he
man.
said
If you're
he
gonna let this, you don't want props for it at the end. You still did it.
He's still Tony Stark, right? He still wants his
wanted
props.
to- it's like,
Take
it was
the
like
bunch
that
of people.
time when I saved that little kid from being run over by a truck
But you still dropped the kid after you say
because I wanted my props.
Well, see, the real world parallel here would be like, think for a moment if Donald Trump had an Iron Man suit and saved anyone from anything even remotely dangerous one time, how long would we have to hear about that before he stopped talking? You know, decades. The rest of his life, we'd hear about that every day. So Tony Stark doing it on occasion, you know, you can understand.
I definitely can. And I'd rather hear it from one Robert Downey Jr. than one Donald J. Trump.
I don't even know why you even brought that up. Put a sour in my whole thing. I've been talking about. I've been
No,
talking
it's
about
funny though.
Endgame.
Think about it in another way. It's pretty hilarious. I mean,
I've been thinking about. I've been talking about Endgame for a week, and I never once brought in. Trump.
take the mask off, and then he's got the hair on the outside of the fucking helmet. You know, it's not good.
Iron Man's gone rogue. We've got to take him out.
Yeah, I'm glad that they don't
suit.
have that in their
He wants,
world.
he wants a suit around the United States. And
We do. But getting back on the topic, you know, you're talking about Ragnarok as being the good Thor. It was also a pretty decent Hulk movie. And I never actually watched The Incredible Hulk. But that one started to make you interested in the Hulk again, too. Like, oh, he's kind of a character. They made him funny again.
That's
You know,
true.
and now in the new one, they went the whole Professor Hulk route. So now it's just like, you know, it's Mark Ruffalo with some, you know, slightly bigger green skin. You're like, okay, this works. And I'm surprised they didn't go gray.
That may have been too jarring for the population at large.
Yeah.
They don't know Mr. Fix-It.
That's true. The next Hulk movie, if they do another one, or if he shows up somewhere else, he could be gray then.
I would
Yeah.
like to see that.
There was actually it's a minority, but there's some fans that were really upset with the whole Professor Hulk. Only because, and not only because, but I would say in large part due to the fact that they wanted to see the Thor, or excuse me, the Hulk Thanos rematch, because they first got into that swap and Thanos handed Hulk his ass pretty handily, you know.
Well, I think though they weren't drawing a huge amount from the comics, they drew that from the comics. In Infinity War, Hulk is Professor Hulk. He's dressed in clothes and they're acting more as a scientist than he is the Hulk.
Well, the thing here is
you got to give
they
some
have-
shout out to the comics.
Yeah.
they have 15 or 20 other people who can hit things really hard, but with no Reed Richards, they're lacking scientists.
I
Yeah.
agree.
They need Dr. Banner in there more than they need somebody to help smash.
Yeah. And Hank Pym is nowhere to be found.
So what?
Hey, Pinball Ultron!
So what I would like to do in this next little segment here, I would take it that we all pretty much enjoyed the movie for the most part,
Yeah.
but let's get into the nitpickingness, because we've been talking about this for days since we saw it. So I definitely have a couple of things that I originally had nitpicks for, and I still do, but the internet being the internet kind of opened my eyes to a couple of other possibilities. So it took my nitpicking of
Those were in porn, though.
First of all, everybody's like, this was the end of a 22 movie saga or whatever. There's still one to go. There's one less, you know, tag to this whole thing that's coming out in, 2 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Far
Well,
from
and so we'll start with that. For me, Far From Home, I have an opinion, because my nitpick was when I watched the movie, because when they showed that part where Peter Parker went back to school and Ned's there with a backpack, my first thought is, it's 5 years later and Ned's still in high school?
Yeah.
Or,
Ned
or am I
was gone,
supposed,
too.
because of Far From Home, we know what's coming out, so now am I supposed to think that everybody in Peter's high school got snapped?
Not everybody, but 50%. If 50% of our class got snapped and you came back, 50% of the class would still be there.
Right, but his 50% is still Flash and MJ and like, so they all.
It was a
none
random
of them-
50%
It
that
wasn't
could
random if it's the entire cast. It's not random. It was Aunt May. It was everybody. She ain't 5 years older. They was like
She could be, because they might be leaning towards Aunt May getting old. That starts to separate them again.
You know what? So that was part of my nitpick.
Oh,
and
I'll
then
wait
with,
till I see it.
And so then with
that
the internet, one of those boggles could have been that.
What if Uncle Ben came back in the snap?
That
What if?
What was it? Oh, that Far From Home actually took place prior to the events of Infinity War. So when they're on the bus, that's them coming back from the airport.
Wow. They've already said it takes place like minutes after Endgame. So like, you know, the scene in Endgame when they're hugging in the school is going to pick up shortly from there.
Oh, okay.
You know,
unless they're lying, because they do that too.
You know, this is totally trivial, but it's comic book related. Why I was happy to see them get a younger actress for Aunt May. Why is Aunt May and Superman's parents always represented like 90 years old? Why?
Well, because Aunt May was supposed to be like 90 years old. You know, she was
know,
his
she was
elderly
always-
aunt
she
that
was
they got
always
left
on
with.
the verge of a heart attack.
I know you got a teenager, his aunt's probably got at the most 20, 25 years on him. And she's she's a million in the comics.
Some people have aunts that are younger than them.
And Superman crash lands and they're convinced that this doddering ancient couple had a baby. I mean, come on. That was one thing. When Man of Steel came out, they had younger parents, more age appropriate, and Aunt May was more age appropriate. I like that.
That's true.
And that's my totally trivial comment that has nothing to do with Endgame that I want to make.
I think it has to do with the times, because like when Superman came out and that elderly couple took that baby in, you know, it was like the 30s. And an elderly couple could just take a baby in, you know, because they would have money and whatever, whereas young people would not do that, I suppose. I don't know. The whole thing was wrong, because today's world, they'd have to turn the baby in and deal. They can't just take the fucker home and start treating him like he's theirs.
And he couldn't be.
Look, I found this baby. It's mine.
And he couldn't get his shots. He was never immunized. They showed the scene where the needle breaks on his skin and he says, "Try it again, doc."
They were farmers. They were totally anti-vax. You know?
Yeah, they tried.
I'll give the vaccinations to the cows, Martha.
I think he had to slide it in through the gap in his eyeball and just slide it in and give him a shot. Or up his nostril, or in his ass. Ow. Well, okay. Now we're off.
Well, that goes back to the internet's arguing that the Ant-Man could have solved this whole thing by just shrinking small, going up Thanos' ass, and then turning into Giant Man. And I said, well, I suppose that could have worked, but what if Thanos' anus landing is stronger than Ant-Man's body? It would have just crushed him into death, you know?
Yeah.
And now you've died by anus, and that's
He would be death by IBS, man. Irritable bowel syndrome would have been his end.
I've died by anus before.
So,
You've dyed your anus before? What?
What color?
Died by and
Easter eggs. Yeah.
I want to circle back to
You want to get off the anus talk? What the
yeah,
hell?
I do kind of want to
Yeah,
get
no more anus needles, okay?
So my first nitpick. This is fresh off of watching Endgame. The problem that I had the most with was at the very end when Captain America goes back in time to put back all the stones.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to even get into the whole loopholiness of the plot where
you have to throw away everything that you think you know about time travel and just go with what they gave
because
us.
not even everything you know about time travel, because even in their story, like how was Steve Rogers was going to get the ether back into Jane Foster? What was he going to do?
Well, they left that to Rocket Raccoon, and they kept it off screen so we wouldn't have to see it.
We saw how Rocket took it out.
That's
So
how we didn't have to
Steve's
see how
gonna
he got
have
it
to put
out.
back
We're not
in.
going to see how he puts
We
it
were
back
back on the
in,
ass
but
needles.
we think we have an idea how it might have happened.
Or even when he has to take back the Soul Stone. I mean, does he get a soul back? Is that how we get?
No,
that's
Yeah.
something that cannot be undone.
So he's just
Uncle
gonna
Ben's death.
give it back and be
Like,
like,
here,
yeah.
hey, Red Skull, remember when we
Well,
were
he's
enemies?
got to give it back to the Red Skull, no less,
Right.
who he hasn't seen
That's going
since
to be
the last
because no
time
one
or
told
so.
Steve it's the Red Skull. They said floaty guy.
Yeah.
He didn't say
They
hey,
should
Steve.
have said
it
that
the
as he
Red
was leaving.
Skull.
Oh, by the way.
But my whole point is,
But see, there's another movie waiting to happen. it is very comic booky, and that we now have plots that could go in 12 more directions if
The
they
life
wanted
and
to.
times of boring Steve Rogers.
Well, see, this is what I was thinking. When he goes back, and I said fundamentally, Steve Rogers is still Steve Rogers. He's always going to be Captain America. So how are we supposed to believe that this is the same guy who volunteered for the Super Soldier program, who did all of this stuff, who would put it on the line, will then choose to go back in time and just live a pedestrian lifestyle? And not just that.
You don't know what he did back there, even though he wasn't being Captain America in those
He was
years, because the
frozen. He
actual
was
Captain America
frozen
was busy
anyway.
frozen.
Well,
The new him that was back there was probably doing things to, stop people
But
from
then-
being evil. and
he
such.
was
Just
snorting
low
coke
profile.
And doing
Yeah.
heroin
Exactly.
because, or turn into a zombie or anything.
even
He'd do
if
drugs.
that, okay,
It'd be
but I was
cool.
saying, even if that, you're still Steve Rogers. You're not the kind of dude that's going to steal another man's life. You're not the guy that's going to go in and purposely steal another man's life when you
It was him.
paid.
No, but they never said
And
who
that's
she was
where
married to.
that's
She could
where
have been
I'm
married,
talking about.
married
and
to
that's
him the
when-
whole time.
'cause this was, I'm saying again, this was my initial reaction right after I watched it. And then when I started listening to all the other things and theories
It
and
was
stuff,
a cover up. She was
it
never
was-
married.
that she was like, because they said in that part in Civil War, because it made sense, because she never said, "Oh, you're alive." She was like, "Oh, you're so young," looking back, because she did get married, and they're saying that it was Steve Rogers the whole time. She went, and so then the only other thing about that storyline is when he made out with his grandniece was disgusting. But then again, Luke and Leia did the same thing, and they didn't know that they were brother and sister. So
If you don't know, it's
if you
okay.
don't know,
Yeah.
it's not incest. If you don't know, but that was nasty.
That's a shirt.
It's not incest if you don't know.
I didn't mind that scene. I thought, Captain America, he's done enough.
Yeah,
He's earned his chance at happiness, and I was glad.
and
they
you know
put
what?
that
And
in.
they did kind of explain it. That says, because like when Rhodey was like, "Hey, how come we can't just go get baby Thanos?" And and they said, first of all, yeah.
So first of all, that was at the end of Deadpool 2. Second,
Well, he didn't even do it. He was like, "Oh, come on, Deadpool, let's go. This baby Hitler, come on." It's like, it's a baby.
I'm saying it's still a thing.
Just But as they explained it in the movie, that the past is the past, and now it's your future, and now when you go into the past, it's your present. Like it was like,
Yeah.
and it was like, well, how do you explain? And he was like, I love when they named off all the different time paradox movies.
Oh yeah,
It's like, are you
Back to the
basing this
Future.
all on Back to the Future? Yeah. It's
Time
time.
bandits, time cop, time
Time.
after time.
Wrinkle in Time.
the Captain America is also a smart dude and realizes that he just saw them do a thing where they pushed time through Ant-Man and made him get old and young and turned him into a baby, and so he could do that, stay back there with his one chance to stay and have that life in the past, age, show up on a bench, and now they can push time through him and make him 35 again if they want to.
Have another life.
And Hank Pym isn't dead anymore, so they aren't lacking particles anymore if they need those too.
Yes.
Love it.
There's certain ways you can go. The other problem that I had, and again, it took me out of the movie, even though this was in the third act. It took me out when they had the funeral scene and they were panning and scanning and showing all this. And then there was just this random teenage kid that was standing by himself. And then they go to, Captain Marvel. And my father was like,
Who the fuck was that
who
kid?
the fuck was that kid? And I think Ralphie was the one who told me. He was like, "Oh man, that was a kid from Iron Man 3. And my first thought was, well, how the hell would he even be there? Like
He hasn't had a direct line to
Has he?
Tony Stark.
I mean,
Tony helped him out. He helped Tony out, rather.
give him a Dora the Explorer watch. I remember that. And he's like, "You want a hug?" He's like, "Back away from the car." And he drove away.
That's what we saw.
Yeah.
What we didn't see was him, tossing him I don't know. A bat line.
There was like 4 other movies. If the kid was there, he didn't even have a job at Stark Industries or nothing.
Yeah, they don't show us that though.
I don't know. It
They
took
think
me.
it's a-
It took me out. And again, with Ralphie and the internet, people were all confirming. And you look in the credits, and it actually was the actor that played. It wasn't just actually a random dude standing there. It was the actual actor who was there. I guess he didn't do anything else.
Tony doesn't have a lot of family, and he considered that kid family. He's not gonna have. They're not gonna have a bunch of like CEOs or some other bullshit like that.
Yeah, and he killed them anyway.
Well,
No, but their ongoing, future plans for Iron Man movies probably include, an Iron Man sort of thing. So they'll have Rescue in there. They'll have the new female Iron Man that somehow they'll find Riri and give her a costume. And then and then they'll have War Machine and a few other ones that they can set up. So it'll be like Iron Man Corps.
I can't wait.
I would think. And it probably will be some sort of animated movie that we'll get as opposed to a theatrical thing. Because they're not paying Gwyneth Paltrow to make a fucking superhero.
I wish they would. I'd punch them all in the goddamn face. I can't wait to see the one with the British Prime Minister, the Iron Lady.
252.
Adonis, pull yourself together.